Hey folks, welcome back. I'm Dave and we're here in my shop where I build Ewor guitars. This is going to be episode number 9 in the series where I'm building this guy right here. And we're doing it mostly on a CNC machine. Any of you that's been watching knows I'm fairly new to CNC machines. In fact, I'm very new to them. And I'm stumbling my way through, but enjoying the heck out of every minute of it. I really love that machine. And I really love learning what you can do with them. But anyway, so that's where we're at right now. We're working on this guy right here. And if you've watched the last couple episodes, you know we've been working on the neck. We've got our neck blank was made up, and we did our scarf joint on it. We thickened this headstock down and got it all set to go. And in last week's video, we did the fretboard. We got it all set. Piece of zero coat. I think it's beautiful. I love that wood. Just a great looking piece of wood. We've got our brass inlaid fret markers in. We did a little stuff with some black epoxy. I think it's looking really cool. And in this video, we're going to carry on with the neck. So the next thing that has to happen to this guy is we need to start, we need to do the rest of the milling on this blank and turn it into the shape it's going to be. And we're going to have to get our truss rod cut into place. We got to drill our tuner holes. Got to do my little Ewor logo up here, cut out the outside profile of the whole thing. And then possibly by that time we'll get this guy glued on here and our headstock plate too, which I didn't mention. We're going to do a headstock plate on it too, which I think is going to be pretty cool. Piece of that zero coat too. So, and if you know, if you've watched any of my guitar building stuff, you know I kind of like to sandwich some veneers in there too. Like under these decorative pieces, I like doing some light and dark laminations. I think that really sets apart the difference between the piece you're adding and like the neck, for instance. So I think it's gonna be pretty cool. But anyway, so I think the first thing I want to do is run this over the CNC machine. I want to do a very simple surfacing operation on both the face of the neck here and the face of the headstock. Then we're going to get some of these veneer pieces glued on there and get rocking and away. So anyway, let's go on over to the CNC machine, get it set up and get rolling with that right now. Okay, so before we go gluing anything onto our neck here, our veneers, I want to go ahead, like I said, I'm going to surface both of these two surfaces off. But at this point, I'm only going to surface this one right here so I can get that headstock glued on. Because when I do the surfacing toolpath on the face of the neck here, that surfacing toolpath is also going to cut that edge of my headstock plate here right along there. I've done that before. It cuts it beautifully square with this surface here, and it cuts it perfectly straight, and it's really nice. So, and the only reason I am relatively certain that everything here is flat and nice, I just want to make one last chance. This has sat now for a few days. It might have done a little bit of movement or whatever, and I just want to make absolutely sure. One last thing. I'm probably going to take no more than 10 thousandths off of here and no more than 10 thousandths off of here, and it should be really nice. So because we're going to do the headstock that sits on a 14-degree angle, I'm going to use this jig here, which is basically just clamped down to my CNC, and I'm going to do some double-sided tape to just tape this down, and we're going to surface sauce this area right here. So I'm going to get this glued down. We're going to draw up a quick tool pass for this. And then we're going to surface this off maybe 5 thousandths at a time. We may do 2 passes for 10 thousandths of an inch. Well, nice, that was beautiful. I took off 5 thousandths of an inch and that hit every square inch of the top of that thing. So I know we were really good. I'm quite pleased with that, very happy. Okay, so I think that came out really well. I've got that headstock cap glued on there, and I went ahead and put it back on the CNC machine just like the last time I did it, and I resurfaced the top down to get it to right at 9/16 of an inch thick. And I checked it all the way around. I've got it's parallel to the back surface, and it all looks good, and I think it looks pretty cool too. Okay, so the next thing I want to do to this thing is I want to surface this portion of the neck too. I think it's probably pretty good, but just as a precaution, as a last minute thing, I'm going to go ahead and run a surface tool path on this, and I'm going to take off just 5/1000ths of an inch. But so look, this is the bit I'm going to use right here. It's just a 3-winged cutter. It's a 1-inch cutter, and if you see the carbide there, that cuts fairly high. That probably cuts a 1/4 inch high overall. So what I also like to use this bit for, I've drawn this tool path to come right up to the edge of this headstock material. So as this is surfacing this off, it's going to come up along here and trim back the edge of that headstock plate. So that should give me a perfectly straight square line through here that's perfectly 90 degrees to the surface of the neck, which I think is really cool. I like doing it that way, and I believe I got all my calculations in there right, and I believe I'm going to have this thing set right. And anyway, got my fingers crossed. We're going to go ahead and run this thing and see how that works. Man, that is absolutely perfectly square. I think that's perfect. I love it. Yep, that is definitely the way to go. Okay, so that came out really well, I think. I did just one pass at 5/1000ths of an inch, and I got that nut line there cut just perfectly square and straight. And I think my nut, now this nut hadn't been shaped and everything, it's going to fit just perfect against that. I think it's going to be really good. So now the next thing I want to do is glue on my other laminates, which are going to be these two guys right here. I've got, that's fumed white oak, and then that's maple. And I'm going to glue that on top of here, like so. And then we're going to cut the truss rod and whatnot into that. So I want this thickness to be on the neck before we go cutting the truss rod. And one thing, and then I'm going to have this little piece of MDF here I'm going to use to clamp it so it's nice and even all the way along the thing. Of course, I'm going to cut a couple of, drill in a couple of indexing pins so this stuff doesn't slide around on me. And I think once I get this glued on, I'm going to come back then afterwards, and I'm going to do a little tool path that's going to cut this, cut the laminate off of right here where the nut's going to go, because I really want that nut to go all the way down and touch that neck surface right there. So probably doesn't matter one way or the other because it's going to get glued on there nice and tight and everything, but I'm just going to go ahead and cut that out anyhow. So at least that's the plan at this point. So anyway, let me get that camera turned down, and we're going to get these laminates glued up. Of course, I'm going to use my UltraCat glue, that powder resin glue, and going to get that glued up and keep carrying on. Okay, so I think that came out really well. We've got our laminations glued on there, so I've got a dark underneath and then a light on top, just like I did underneath the headstock plate. And you know, I mean, it's just a tiny little detail. It'll probably go unnoticed by a lot of people when the guitar is done, but to me, those great little details, the little fine details in there, really add to the aesthetic of a guitar. But anyway, so now that that stuff is done, we are ready to move on and start cutting out the truss rod. We're going to get the outside profile cut out. We got to get a little Ewor logo up here. We got to get our tuners in place and get the whole thing cut out. And to do that, we're doing that on a CNC machine. And to do that, I'm going to use this sled here that I've made. And I've used a little bit already in this series, but I haven't really stopped to explain what it does. So on my CNC machine, it cuts a total length and width of 25 inches. That's it. That's all the further it's going to go. I know some people will work the tool paths to cut on a diagonal, which gets you a little bit more. But so far, I've just been working in the straight X and Y axis on my CNC machine. So our necks are this neck here. Now the blank is like 32, but the finished neck itself is 27 inches long. That's more than 25, so it's not going to fit on that machine unless you do something like you do two different cuts, and that's what we're going to do. They have something in Vectric V-Carve called a tile tool path, which means you can cut something like this that's longer, and you can cut from here to here and do all your moves, and then move the thing down and cut from here to here. And the way you do the tiling, the machine knows right where to pick up from where you left off if you move it right. It's a fairly simple thing. It's explained in Vectric V-Carve, and there's lots of videos out about it. And it's not a hugely complicated thing to do. I've done it several times now. But what's tricky about this is guitar necks have to be absolutely precise. And you've got to get them they've got to be dead on. And so I want to make sure that when I move this thing, I get it set up back up in exactly the same spot, or, you know, along the Y axis. I want to make sure it's exactly in the same spot, because I don't want to just shift it by mistake a 32nd of an inch or something, because then it's going to cut the thing off. The other tricky part about mine is my first tile is going to cut from the end of the neck, which is about here, to just past the nut line. So I'm getting the neck all cut at one tile, so there's absolutely no change in the straightness of the thing. But then when I move to cut my second tile, I got to tilt this thing onto a 14-degree angle and then pick up the second tile here and cut it on this angled headstock part, which is a little bit tricky. So that's why I made this sled. So I've got this neck, of course, it's got stripes down the back, and you've got to make sure that these stripes are absolutely centered, and that's another reason for having this sled too. So this sled, I've got two holes in the back of my neck, okay? And I've got two corresponding holes in the back of on the top of this sled, and this has got pins in it here, okay? These two holes, incidentally, they're quite shallow, so once we carve this neck, they're going to go away. This neck, when it's set on this sled, let's see here, set into those holes, okay, that neck, the center line of that neck is exactly 2 inches off of this edge right here. So having this edge perfectly parallel to the center line of this neck, I should be able to move this sled on a fence, and that center line, once I determine the center line on the machine, or actually once it goes into this little pinhole, that's where it's all set up from. If I align that in that pinhole right, and I have it set on on this sled against that fence, when I move it, that should keep everything in perfect alignment from one end to the other. That's a horrible explanation, I'm sure. But anyway, that's how this sled's going to work. So I'm going to double-sided sticky tape. Oh, and another thing is too, I could take this off of this sled and put it back on at another time, and it'll still maintain, which I'm going to have to do at one point during this thing, and it'll still maintain its center line because of those two pinholes in the back. So anyway, like I said, horrible explanation, but hopefully it'll make a little bit of sense when we get moving along. So, but for now, I'm going to get a little double-sided sticky tape down in this thing, and then we're going to go start cutting our truss rod in and get that going. I hate sharing with you guys this type of stuff when stuff goes wrong, but I've got to, because these are the types of things that go wrong, and this is the fix I came up with. So anyway, so I was setting up to do this outside profile line. Everything was going great. My truss rod laid in there beautifully. Go to cut this. What I do is I cut a shallow pass on the outside profile, and this was in tile tool path number 1. And I cut that, and I said, well, let me see what this is going to look like with my, because this is what I do. I'm kind of playing around with myself. I said, well, let me lay my fretboard up there and see what it looks like. When I did, I said, well, why the heck is my fretboard like 1/8 of an inch wider on either side than the cutout for that? Because it should have fit perfect. That should have been an exact fit, or very close to it. I think the fretboard is a little bit wider. And then it occurred to me, I said, doggone it, when I wrote this tool path for this, you've got 3 choices when you're cutting a profile tool path. You can either cut inside the line, on the line, or outside the line. And I had the checkbox checked off to cut on the line, because the last thing I did, I was cutting on the line. And in this case, that is wrong. I was supposed to be cutting on the outside of the line, because that line is my fretboard. So anyway, so I sat here and hemmed and hawed about it a little bit, but I think all I'm going to do is I'm going to put my surfacing bit on there. I'm going to take 1/8 of an inch off of the top of this thing, relaminate a piece of cherry on there with my 2 veneers on top of that, and then start all over again, cutting again. And I hate doing it, but I think it is a fixable deal, and that's just the way it goes. We making guitars, a lot of mistakes happen. You just got to figure out how to fix it and move forward. So anyway, I'm probably not going to film all this stuff, but I'm going to go ahead and slice this off of there, put a new one back on, and hopefully tomorrow morning the glue will be dry and we'll be moving again with working on this neck. Okay, well, I hate it when mistakes happen, but you know what? I learn something every time I make a mistake. I learn how to get a little bit better. Sometimes I learn what not to do next time. No, every time I learn what not to do next time. And that's the way this one's going to be too. So I'm going to take it for what it is. I think we're back on track now. I got this thing all glued up. It's coming apart now, and we're going to get it back on that CNC machine and start going with the truss rod and hopefully get the perimeter cut at the right width this time. Anyway, let's get this thing over in the CNC machine and get rolling right now. All right, so this is the guy that always makes me a little bit nervous because, well, stuff could go wrong. So I've got my angled fixture set up on here. And I've got the tape on the back of my sled. And I've also laid out my tile tool path number 2. I did some dimensioning off of the drawing on the computer, and I laid that mark out there. So my the 1 axis should already be set since I'm still going back to my original fence. So the 2nd axis is the one which I guess is going to be the x-axis, is one I'm going to need to set off of that mark. So right now I'm perfectly flushed up with this edge against my fence. And give this stuff a second to dry. I should be able to put my very sharp point. I'll put a 30-degree angle bit in there. I'll drop it right down on that and tell that, okay, that is my, that's my Y0. Okay, and I'll tell it to go back to the X, which should be right along the side here. And that should hopefully lay right in these 2 lines here and cut out that headstock profile just right, but we will see. Man, I like that a lot. I think that looks really good. I'm very pleased with that. Okay, so that thing's looking cool. I've got basically all of the machining work done on this neck I'm going to do. Now, all I did was a shallow pass here before, just